Hi, it's Anne-Marie from Charmed Life Therapy, back with another little video about the Blake Lively affair. And honestly, I've been trying to put this one off because I want to say all kinds of different things that are all over the place. So I might have to check my notes. Ugh, it's I've gotten to this point with this story where I think, oh, I don't know if I've bitten off more than I ever wanted to chew, because I never thought it was all going to go this far. And now we've got Blake having this amicus brief, if you like. And I was just looking at what this means roughly, and I watch Katie over on Without a Crystal Ball quite a lot for the legal perspective of that, because she's very good with the filings and everything. But this amicus brief, from what I understand, generally you would need permission from the court to file an amicus brief, unless you had permission from all of the parties involved, which of course Justin is not going to give permission for this amicus brief. So I don't know what the situation is there. I know the court doesn't have to take any notice of this amicus brief, but it's important, seeing as I've covered everything else mostly, that I have to cover this, even though kind of it's a bit enraging to most people, this idea of these legal rights organisations. Because I think when it's an amicus brief, they have to have, it's about being a friend of the court and saying to the court, are you sure you know what you're talking about? Let's show you some legal arguments possibly you've not thought of as a judge. And now you'd think if you were a judge that would be fairly annoying. But I guess sometimes it is helpful to them. So we've got these three organisations so far that have written this amicus brief, this letter, whatever it is, in support of Blake Lively as a survivor, supporting her motion to dismiss Justin countersuing her for defamation. And defamation isn't the only thing that Justin is countersuing her for, isn't there? Extortion as well as everything else involved. He should be suing her for having an invisible smear campaign against him, because when you think of all those stories that were coming out in August of 24 that were saying Justin was unprofessional, he was chauvinistic, he was focused on the male abuser's viewpoint in the movie, the women on set were scared of him. All of these stories were coming out in August in publications like TMZ, like the Daily Mail, like Us Weekly, Page 6, all of these leaks that were probably coming from Leslie Sloan, I would imagine, allegedly. And we have Melissa Nathan during that time, who was basically, what she was trying to do was mitigate some of those stories that were coming out and trying to flood it with the positives, instead trying to correct those publications where they were saying false statements. That was what she was doing, the crisis PR lady. And Jen Abel, there's absolutely no proof so far that Jen Abel spoke to anybody about trying to get articles out in the press or across social media that would defame Blake, that would put her in a false light. They were all sat back ready, as we know, to do something if it was necessary, but clearly it was obvious they couldn't do anything better than what was actually Blake was doing for herself, and it's like this amicus brief and her claim that she is this survivor. We have those moments during that promo time in August where she clearly says, pretty much paraphrasing here, but luckily I haven't experienced the things that Lily has, but we all know people who have. So she literally says, I have not known sexual harassment, I have not known sexual abuse. And that's kind of why she relied on costume to get into this character, to try and get into the headspace of somebody who's a florist who wears Louboutin shoes and somehow gets sexually abused, harassed, whatever it is, by a domestically violent partner. It doesn't make any sense when you look at it in that perspective. So this amicus brief, I'm going to read this. So we've got the Equal Rights Advocates, the California Employment Lawyers Association, and the California Women's Law Center, all kind of trying to point out to the judge this idea of if he doesn't dismiss Justin's lawsuit, then he's kind of going against this California Civil Code section 47.1, this part of Assembly Bill 933, which protects individuals from who report sexual misconduct, I guess in a workplace setting maybe particularly, from retaliatory lawsuits, because it must have become a thing that when women or men, whoever, were reporting sexual misconduct, that, you know, wealthy employers, wealthy people on the other side of it were just raising lawsuits, counter lawsuits against those people and coming up with a whole bunch of stuff and using money and power to kind of hold sway, I guess. But we know that's not what's happening here. And what Justin is doing with his countersuit, he's doing in what they call good faith, isn't he? And it's backed by a whole bunch of proof. I mean, we still yet to this day have no proof from Blake Lively. And surely at this point, if they had it, if they had video, if they had audio, if they had text messages, we would actually see it. You know, they'd be showing us something by now. But it's basically... And you're not telling me, and this is purely my own opinion, but you are not telling me there hasn't been some payoff to these organisations in order to do this, or some promise of favours or support or something down the line. I don't actually believe they're doing this out of the good of their own hearts as organisations, unless it's purely to protect that law, and they believe the law, that segment of the law has to be there, even in the face of whoever is claiming to be using it at the time, that it's so important, this law, that it has to remain in that way no matter who's claiming it. And I kind of wanted to talk about this you see, my feeling about all of this is still that the whole reason this is happening in a more spiritual sense is it is God, life, the universe, source, whoever you want to call it, showing us where we're going wrong. And this case started out as something stupid in a way, something silly that should have just gone away, something Blake has brought about on herself. So it should have been some silly little fluff piece of nothing. But now look at what's happening and who we're getting involved and the wider aspects of who it's affecting and how many lives, it doesn't matter who is being trampled on. Because, like I say, we've got Blake actually contradicting in her lawsuit things that she said in person on camera to us, and she's involving these organisations. She's having laws brought into question, Me Too movement brought into question, because she's basically saying she wants Justin's counterclaims, countersuits against her dismissed because she should be unilaterally believed. That is literally what she is saying. She has the right to be unilaterally, without question, without any proof, believed, and nobody else can be believed except her and her minions. That's basically what we're dealing with. So kind of, I guess people are kind of a bit annoyed with these organisations, the pro-Justin people, because it's like, have you actually been following the law case at all and seen all of the things that we have been, you know, all of the people that have been talking about this across the board? Have you actually seen the evidence? Have you been daisy chaining it all together like, you know, really smart people like Katie from Without a Crystal Ball? I can never say Katie Joy. She sometimes calls herself Katie Joy on Without a Crystal Ball here on YouTube. And every time she does, I think of The Handmaid's Tale and Serena Joy. Which possibly isn't entirely flattering to Katie, but I think because you don't see her face on those videos, she does seem like some mega powerful entity, but she's doing a really good job of it, with many other people that are taking the time out of their lives to read every piece of evidence, to read through all of the court documents, and then to have, you know, these organisations come out and just say, we want to be a friend of the court, and just tell Judge Lyman exactly what he should be thinking and feeling about this case, and that he should be entirely behind Blake and just dismiss anything that goes against what she says, because she is a victim. And why is she a victim? Because she claims she's a victim. She doesn't need any evidence, apparently. So yeah, a lot of people out there are none too happy about this, but you know, the courts are kind of unpredictable things. They don't have to look at this amicus brief. It can just sit there and not have anything done about it. It can be have something done about it at some point in the future, I guess. But it has to sit there. And that's the thing. We just kind of have to get our heads around that. There might be more organisations that she rounds up to do the self same thing, but none of this is evidence. None of this is evidence, and that's what we have to remind ourselves of. And the thing is, you can already see kind of the wider repercussions. I noticed yesterday that there's a thing, I don't know, I've not heard anything about it before, but Kevin Costner's being called into question apparently now. There's something that happened at the beginning of May, apparently filming on this, is it Horizon American Saga 2, where a stunt woman, I think she's called Devin, let me just check my notes, Devin Labella, who was standing in for an actress called Ella Hunt. And she's saying that she kind of feels like she was sexually harassed or put in a sexually vulnerable position on set by Kevin Costner without adequate warning. Apparently, if they have to stand in for something of that nature that requires and she claims there was no intimacy coordinator during this particular part of filming, and that part of her contract, she says, was to have an intimacy coordinator while this was happening. So her story is, her version of events is that she was called to stand in for this actress, this Ella Hunt, at short notice to do what was like this violent staged rape scene, assault scene. So her story is that the actress didn't want to do it, so they turned to the stunt woman. It must have been part of her contract, whatever. It must have been detailed in some way, because stunt woman, stand-in, whatever, she must have had it in there that if it involved anything sexual, then that she needed an intimacy coordinator, or that's what she's telling us. And this is what's interesting, because of the Blake thing and it happening at this time, you start thinking, this is the danger of what Blake is doing, because you start questioning every woman automatically, which is a good thing, because we shouldn't unilaterally believe people, but there will be people who do have maybe little or no evidence that are genuine cases that kind of are going to go by the by because of all of this. Or it's complex, isn't it? Because you automatically, it's hard to know with this case. I find it hard to believe that Kevin Costner, as an experienced filmmaker, producer, worked with plenty of women. I'm not aware of anybody that is made uncomfortable on set in this kind of way. But it calls him immediately into question, doesn't it, really? Because he's the man with the power. This lady is saying that she was forced to do this scene that she wasn't prepared for, basically, that involved this actor or whoever mounting her and various times and hiking up her skirt roughly and the rest of it. Now, on the other side of the story, the stunt coordinator, he says she gave him the thumbs up afterwards, that she seemed fine on the set afterwards, that they went out and ate together afterwards, that there seemed no ill effects. But she's saying crew members were apologising to her for what had happened. She was saying that it's questioned her whole idea about the industry and her place within it. She said days later it was like having kind of flashbacks or whatever, or just weeping, without conscious cause or whatever you want to call it. And the thing is, all of these things can be true if you genuinely have been put in a sexually vulnerable position. But this is why this case, the Blake Lively case, is so important, and that it does have the right outcome, because these are the wider repercussions about it. This woman may not be genuine. She may be a liar. She may be looking at the Blake Lively thing and seeing what can happen. And, Blake's getting all these organisations involved that say you have to unilaterally believe the woman, and the woman should be the one that gets a say, and the woman has to have the payout. She may be a genuine case, but it's like, who do we trust now? What is these laws doing to protect genuine victims? Who is manipulating it for their own purposes? Who is seeing a payout? Who is seeing a way to ruin a good man's reputation just because they need an outcome that suits their own narrative, whatever it is. So there's this story going on now to do with Kevin Costner, and Kevin Costner's side of things, his attorney is saying this woman has done this time and time again using this same lawyer. This is her modus operandi. But on the other line, on the other side, from what I've seen, it does feel a little bit believable, doesn't it? That sometimes in a work situation, you are called to do things that feel uncomfortable. And I guess as an actor, actress, stand-in, stuntman, sometimes those things will feel a bit sexually uncomfortable or out of what is the norm. And you're entering that grey space, aren't you, between what's real and what's imaginary. And I guess sometimes it is only days later when things hit you that maybe that wasn't comfortable, or maybe it pushed your boundaries or triggered certain things that maybe were in your past or whatever it was. So yeah, this is why it's really important, I think, that the Blake Lively case is handled very carefully, and that it does come back to evidence, and that people, if they're going to if they're going to step in and make themselves known, like these organisations, actually are just looking at all of the facts and not just like the plain nature of the law, but actually look at the person that is trying to bring that into fruition, and are they using that for nefarious purposes that are going to harm other victims. I think that's what's enraging a lot of people right now, and that's what's so frustrating about this, is that you've got this person, Blake Lively, who just is willing to do anything and everything not to be called to blame, not to be held accountable for her actions. She's willing to wreck anything in her orbit, anybody else's career. I mean, I found it quite interesting that Hugh Jackman's wife has chosen this moment in time now. I guess like if she's finally, going full out on the divorce, it's been finalised or whatever it is, maybe it's only now she feels free to speak. But Deb Jackman, or Deborra-Lee Furness, or however you want to call her, whatever she goes by. I've always had a lot of respect for her, because I've always felt like she must have had to be a really strong woman, because she was so much older than you, and like you, hot young guy when he was in his prime, that's got to have been really difficult for her, because people go to just pick out all the flaws in the older woman and how is he with her and all of that. So she had all of that to take. She had all of that to take over. Oh, he's gay and she must be a beard and all of that. And, him being surrounded by young actresses on set, young hot women like Halle Berry and what's the Bond girl, Famke Janssen, and all of those kinds of people, Ashley Judd, all these beautiful women. And I find this really interesting now that she's come out with this statement about sympathising with other women that have experienced betrayals within their relationships, and what it can teach you about that. And I imagine it would be, I think they should Brian Friedman should find a way to depose Deborra-Lee Furness, because I imagine she's had to suck up an awful lot in terms of socialising with Blake and Ryan. And if she is quite a moralistic person, and Aussie people, they tend to be fairly straight up, don't they? They don't tend to be calculating, I don't think. Like, it is how it is. I imagine there's a lot she's seen and had to experience and just go with and keep quiet about, and just rise above a lot of stuff. And then after all of that, he's still basically gone off and cheated on her with a younger woman, and I imagine there's an awful lot of hurt there. But I do find it very interesting, all of the timing on this, and I'd be interested to know your own thoughts too, about everything I'm saying here. And yeah, the only other thing I was saying, I made a video about Tom Cruise kind of versus Ryan Reynolds the other day, and I know most people don't, there's a lot of people maybe that don't want to analyze Tom Cruise maybe that much, or I know he's really, for some people he's really, really popular. He's kind of a polarizing figure, isn't he, Tom Cruise? Either he's kind of a love him or hate him thing, or you you have concerns about his religion or whatever it is. But it's I'm just telling you my thoughts and what it triggers in me. All of this that's happening at the same time. I'm just talking, what I choose to talk about is what it triggers in me that is like, that's really, really interesting. But why I kind of, it triggered me the Tom Cruise is I found that Top Gear clip where if you know a little bit about Top Gear, they kind of compete, don't they, driving like a race car, who gets the fastest times, and Top Gear used to keep a running list of who were the fastest times. And Ryan Reynolds specifically wanted to beat Tom Cruise's time, and he does say in that clip, if you look at my Tom Cruise video, he does say, and not just on the track, basically. So he wanted to beat him for more than just the race. It's him, he wants his career, basically. He wants his empire, that type of thing. He wants to be considered Tom Cruise's level, basically. That's what you're hearing, really. In that clip, he was desperate to do it. He has to go out again and do a round of it, because they don't tell him at the time how fast they were. So he knew what Tom Cruise's speed was, because it was on the board, it was from earlier. So he wanted as many opportunities as he could to beat that timing. So I found that very, very interesting, and that made me go off and spiral into, let's look at Tom Cruise's movies as opposed to Ryan Reynolds. And the kind of one thing that I really noticed that was interesting is Ryan Reynolds is very rarely in a film where there like are people similar age, considered good looking, virile, manly. Like the only movie I could kind of think of, I mean, he's been in movies with people like Denzel Washington and The Rock, but they're physically different, they're a different age group, they're not like an exact threat, you know what I mean, like a smack on peer, if you like. It's a comfortable thing of, I'm not expected to be like that person, I can be me. He's expected to be him, I'm expected to be me. The only movie I could come up with, and I only did this quickly, so forgive me if there's more, but I know there's that movie Life with Jake Gyllenhaal and Rebecca Ferguson. So there you've got like a young cast of about the same age. You've got like Jake and Ryan smack up against each other, if you like, haven't I? But this is the interesting one, is that Ryan, spoiler alert, Ryan dies within like 20 minutes into the movie, doesn't he? So he's not up against it for very long. He's there for a purpose, to be like this cameo, this shock factor. Then he just goes off. He's not competing with Jake Gyllenhaal for the screen, for acting chops all the way through that movie. He's there for a purpose and he's gone. So for me, that allows him to be comfortable in that position. But I don't think there's many roles for Ryan where he's up against somebody within a movie where it's like direct competition for him, if you see what I mean, either in terms of what he's supposed to bring to the thing and looking a certain way and being a certain, like even in Blade, which he was in, nobody's expecting him to be like Wesley Snipes, are they, in that? You know what I mean? He kind of just is buff in his own way for his own character's purposes. He's not meant to be the direct competition to Blade, or better than him, or perceived better than him, or whatever it is. Whereas Tom Cruise is very, very interesting, and that's the difference between Tom Cruise and Ryan Reynolds. Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively, everybody is their competition. They have to be better than everybody else. They have to be right. Whereas Tom Cruise, you could say, well, yeah, he likes his own way. He likes to be the producer. He likes everything. But that's within the creative process. When you look at who Tom Cruise has worked with, he's worked with acting greats, where he's under that pressure to perform. He's worked with Dustin Hoffman. He's worked with Gene Hackman. He's worked with Paul Newman. He's worked with Robert Redford, Meryl Streep. You could go on and on again. A lot of men, powerful men. Did I say Dustin Hoffman? All the main ones. But he's also happily shared screen time with either hot buff men of his own age, or hot buff men even younger. He's happily shared screen time with people like Jeremy Renner, like Henry Cavill. Who else is there? There's often hot buff men that he could be compared to, that he gives good lengths of screen time and good scenes to, scenes that are equally you know, you think of Henry Cavill loading his fists in that Mission Impossible Fallout, and he only did that once, and he did it accidentally just because his arms ached, and he just kind of shot them out to relieve the tension, and it wasn't meant to happen again when they went back to film again, and he didn't do it. Tom Cruise was like, do the thing again, so you know what I mean? He wants other men in his orbit that could be perceived as competition to have their own standout to have their own standout moments. When they're on his sets, he's not worried about it. I guess the only thing he doesn't allow them to do is run at the same time as him. There's not many people that get to run at the same time as Tom Cruise, is there? But you can see what I mean. His onus is on the filmmaking process and on making an amazing movie and having the grace to know that that doesn't mean it always has to be him that shines. He's quite happy for other people to shine too and to have their moments, and he knows that it's important for everybody to have their moments across the board. And my feeling is people like the likes of Ryan and Blake, they can't handle that. They truly can't handle that. And that's what's very, very interesting, and that's part of what I wanted to talk about today. So I'm no legal expert. I'm not the moral compass on whether all women should be believed and how we handle that. But these are just the aspects of it that I wanted to bring to you today. I found it very interesting that Blake has brought this amicus brief and involved these organisations, and that at the same time Kevin Costner is being hit with this stunt woman who's claiming that she was made to feel uncomfortable on set and unprepared and unprotected, if you like, and is claiming to have been left to go off and deal with that on her own, if you like. And it's a very interesting comparison to be happening at the same time as this Blake Lively thing, because it just kind of makes you start to think, how are we going to handle this going forward? Because when you've had a case as big as the Blake Lively thing, and it is right that people should not be unilaterally believed, but it's making it very murky, because you're instantly going to, there can't help but be a part of you that thinks that this woman is not genuine, even though she's saying things that sound like they could be genuine, and you don't always know what has truly affected you till a couple of days after. It doesn't always hit you straight away. As a woman, we're often dealing with things at the time, and we kind of just are in the moment and we cope with it. It's only a couple of days later that we really realise how much our boundaries have been crossed. But we don't have any evidence of that, any upset in Blake's case, anything like that in her case. This woman almost sounds like a bit more credible, but is she looking at the Blake case and thinking, I'll have a piece of that, thank you very much? This is like all the questions we're going to be asking ourselves going forward. So that's my thoughts for today, basically, and I'd be interested to know your thoughts and what you're thinking about it all, and whether it's making you angry, and how you think what's going to happen next. All right, do please hit that like and subscribe and consider sharing it. I really appreciate you all watching, and I will see you again soon. Bye bye.